Hello class, welcome to English literature class, and today I am going to discuss the paper for BCA and BBM courses in English literature subsidiary paper. The drama which has been prescribed for the first year BCA and BBM students is Merchant of Venice, which is written by William Shakespeare. So, before moving ahead to understand the drama, let us know who Shakespeare was and a little bit about the age in which he wrote. William Shakespeare was born on 23rd April 1564. He was the son of a prosperous tradesman of the town, and Shakespeare did not have a very great education. He went to a very famous school, local grammar school, where he learnt uh, Latin and arithmetic. It was the sound education in his school which made him go so far. So, because of the financial misfortunes, he was taken at the age of 14 from education to earning. On the nature of his employment, very little is known, and at a very young age of 19 years, he married Anne Hathaway, a woman who was 8 years elder to him, and this marriage was very hasty and ill-advised and appears to become an unhappy one. 3 children were born to them: Susanna, Judith, and Hamnet. Tradition says that meanwhile he fell into bad company and that a deer stealing scaped in the woods of Charlotte Hall obliged him to fly away from his home. So both bad company and deer deer stealing made him go on a different way. There may be or may not be truth in this story because very little justification is known about it. It is seen that at the time drama was gaining very much popularity in England through the works of the university, which Shakespeare turned into writing plays. Okay, so when he moved towards stage, he first became an actor and then a playwright. An ill-natured reference to him in a pamphlet written by George Green shows that in 1592 he was well known as a successful author. He remained in London upwards for 20 years after this, producing an average a couple of plays a year and growing steadily in fame and wealth. He became a shareholder in 2 of the leading theatres of the time, the Globe and the Blackfriars, and purchased property at various places in London. But the years which brought prosperity also brought domestic sorrows. There are some very sad sad events events associated with Shakespeare, and that you can find when you go in details about the life of Shakespeare. But then moving ahead into the literary side, we see that Shakespeare's biography proves conclusively, like Chaucer, that he was no dreamer, but a practical man of affairs. He reached London poor and friendless. He left it rich and respected. and his fortunes were the work of his own hand. Much light is thus thrown not upon his personal character, but also upon his writings, in which great powers of creative imagination are combined and supported by a wonderful feeling for reality, sound common sense, and a large and varied familiarity with the world. Of the learning which is shown in his plays and about which so much has been written, it is enough here to say that it is not the learning of the trained and accurate scholar of Bacon or Ben Jonson, but rather the wide miscellaneous knowledge of many things which was naturally accumulated by an extraordinarily assimilative mind during years of contact with men and books at a time when all social interactions and all literature were saturated. Translations gave him easy access to the treasures of ancient literature, the intellectual atmosphere of the environment in which he lived and worked was charged with new ideas and was immensely stimulating. So, when we focus on the works written by Shakespeare, we see that of miscellaneous and doubtful pieces have been omitted, but there is a huge body of works which are credited to Shakespeare. The famous narrative poems Venus and Adonis and Lucrece, followed by a sequence of 154 sonnets, in which the first 126 is addressed to his friend and the rest is to the Dark Lady. Okay, so moving ahead to drama, we see that Shakespeare's dramatic composition comprises of around 37 plays, though the authenticity of several of those is still doubtful. But let's not move into the criticism part and go by the general data which is provided by different books and different authentic links. So we see that these famous writings have been divided into four distinct phases. Okay, four different distinct periods by many critics, and these periods comprise from 1588 to 93, which is the early period, 1594 to 1600, which is the period of great comedies and chronicle plays, then period from 1601 to 08, which is of the tragedies, and the last period, the latest one is the 1608 to 12, okay, which comprises of the later romances or the dramatic romances. So when we look at the early period, we see works like Henry VI, Titus Adonis, Love's Labour Lost, Two Gentlemen of Verona, The Comedy of Errors, Midnight's Summer Dream. These are the famous plays which were written during this particular phase of 1588 to 93. These works as a whole is extremely slight in texture. The treatment of life in it is superficial, and there is a very little depth or thought of characterization. So it shows the early level of writing in drama by Shakespeare. When we move ahead to the next period from 1594 to 1600, we see the period of great comedies and chronicle plays. And the works of this period are Richard II, King John, The Merchant of Venice, Henry IV, Henry V, Taming of Shrew, The Merry Wives of Windsor, Much Ado About Nothing, As You Like It, and Twelfth Night. In this, he shows a little independence, where there's a development in power and technique, and the character is more strong, the thoughts are more heavy, and Shakespeare has seems to have grown. In the next period, we see a very deep indulgence into the growth the growth of tragedies. Okay, so the intellectual power and the power of expression is supreme. This is the time of the supreme masterpiece by Shakespeare. Works like Julius Caesar, Hamlet, All's Well That Ends Well, Measure for Measure, Troilus and Cressida, Othello, King Lear, Macbeth, Antony and Cleopatra, Coriolanus, and Timon of Athens are the famous dramas written by Shakespeare, the famous plays written by Shakespeare. Now, moving to dramatic romances, the dramatic romances or the later romances, we see that there is a sudden and singular change in the temperament of Shakespeare. And a very tender and gracious tone prevails now. There is a slight decline seen. Works like Cymbeline. So now let's focus on the writings which Shakespeare wrote. They are The Tempest, Cymbeline, The Winter's Tale. Okay, and when we see how far Shakespeare's work is a revelation of his life, we feel that it shows the trace not just of his own thought and feelings, but of the entire humanity, right from nobility till low middle class, low people. So this is a brief history of uh, life of Shakespeare in a gist, not a very detailed one, a brief glance into Shakespeare's life, how he came to writings, and the four distinct periods of Shakespeare's dramas. Okay, so in the next class, in my next lecture, I'll focus on the characteristics of Shakespeare's works, the characteristics of Shakespeare's works, and the way it differs with the way it differs from the works of other dramatists of his age. Thank you.